Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say, bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful February the 12th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, everything is wonderful down here. When you look at the world of sports, it's like Groundhog Day. Every time you turn around, the sun is rising on a new story.
The sun is always nice to see, especially in the wintertime. It's so hot here in Northern California. I want to say Big C Sports today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. You can also find out that Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on two apps that I love called Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate that. Also, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe, Big C. It was like Groundhog Day, so I thought I'd say the introduction twice, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, as we sit around and look at the world of sports and, the labyrinth that it goes through daily with the cycles and news and information that keeps us all teetering on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
That's what Groundhog Day does.
That's right. We just did our own version of Groundhog Day as we did the introduction twice. Just wanted to keep everything consistent. Big C, also, what we are very consistent at doing is I love praising our military veterans. We do have the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and they are experienced at helping veterans and their loved ones. The crisis line for veterans needing help is 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you are online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, as we have our politicians out there bickering every day about who's best to serve the country, and some of them doing indignant things, Charlton, none of them are talking about the plight of our ex-military personnel, about the help that they need in everyday society in America, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, Charlton. But, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is one of those lines that is there that helps those veterans and even everyday citizens in America. We're stricken so much in this great country by this plight called suicide, Charlton, that has afflicted so many families and generations of people.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way to stem that in America as a culture, because it does not discriminate.
Yep.
And so the National Suicide Hotline, Charlton, is there for people to have a voice to listen to.
Yeah.
And talk to. So any way that we can get that out and people can have access to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is a great American service.
It's a great American service, Big C. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and hopefully they can give some help. Also, Big C is launching a real estate channel, real estate TV show, spring of 2020. The goal is simply recruit 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on television. I remember talking about what it costs for a Super Bowl ad, and the reason you can get $4 million or $5 million for a Super Bowl ad at 30-second spot is because the advertisers know that television works. If you're a real estate broker and you're going to your listing appointment, if you can tell them that you can put their properties on television compared to the opposition that may come in and say, hey, we can put you on Facebook or Craigslist or put flyers in the neighborhood, you're going to get that listing. It's the next level up. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, exposure is always the key. Reaching as many ears and eyes that you can anytime you're advertising.
And it's always worked. You can kill your business in 3 simple steps. Don't advertise. Don't advertise. Don't advertise. You can advertise with the real estate channel that we're launching with Big C Sports, Big C Real Estate. So really looking forward to that. You know, so much happens in this world of sports, Big C. And I know we were just talking, not too long ago, as we have all the NBA trades, have happened. And when you think about Jones just won his UFC bout, and now that's 14 times that he defended his title. And that's the record. No one has, even though it's contested, Big C, you can't really contest anything. No one ever thought they lost the fight. But the Toronto Raptors, they have their chance to extend their winning streak. They've already won 15 straight, Big C. The defending world champions from Canada, they're trying to get to 16 straight. Big C, I know the game is going on right now, but isn't that amazing that the market that won the championship last year, they had maybe the second most coveted player in the universe in Kawhi Leonard, only second to LeBron James in my opinion. Without him, I don't think they ever won 16 in a row with the great Kawhi Leonard. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it just lets you know that, Kawhi Leonard may have been the MVP of the playoffs last year, Charlton, but was he really the MVP of the Toronto Raptors? If you look at the number of games he missed with that team last year, they were 17-1 without him in the lineup last year. So this is a team that really knows how to play with Kawhi Leonard. And really, who's the better team? Is the Toronto Raptors a better team, or the Los Angeles Clippers a better team that has Kawhi Leonard on it?
Yeah.
And no one saw this coming as far as other than the Toronto Raptors. This is a team that's been maturing over the years under Budenholzer as the head coach. And, players have stepped up and gotten even better without Kawhi around, saying, hey, was it him or was it all of us?
It's probably all of us unless you can pass the ball to yourself. We saw that happen in the Duke game. Guy passed it off the backboard and got a shot. But if you look at the Big C's Power Top 10 NBA Power Rankings, I know the All-Star game is coming up, Team LeBron James versus Team Giannis, and that's going to be on Sunday. But the Power Rankings right now, you have the Milwaukee Bucks at 1. The defending world champions without Kawhi Leonard, Toronto Raptors, they're number 2. The number 3 so far in the rankings would be the Los Angeles Lakers, followed by number 4, the Boston Celtics. Houston wasn't buying that last night, Big C. They said, take this for your power rankings. Houston kind of beat them up good last night, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the NBA is a night-in, night-out league, and it's about travel and about where you're playing at. And teams, when you look at power rankings, they can mean something to somebody, but it doesn't mean anything to the players because the game is played on the court.
Yeah, it's always played on the court, followed up by the Denver Nuggets, number 5. The LA Clippers coming in at number 6. So maybe Kawhi wants to go back to Canada, Big C. I hear they were going to give him the whole country of Canada. Right now, he only gets the half of Los Angeles. Number 7, the Houston Rockets. Number 8, Utah Jazz. Number 9, the Miami Heat. And number 10, the Philadelphia 76ers. So how much do rankings really matter in power rankings? It's almost like the weather. Some days you're hot, some days you're cold. But we just mentioned that some of these lists out here have the Celtics number 4, where they were just knocked up by the number 17 in Houston Rockets. So much for the power rankings, kind of like the weather. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's like the NFL. Everyone thought that the Baltimore Ravens were the best team in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they go down in the first round of the playoffs to the Tennessee Titans, a wild card team.
Yeah.
It's about who's playing on that court or the field that particular day.
Yeah, it always is. And so one of the things I also love about NBA basketball, and I don't know if you agree with this, Big C, but when I look at the influence of the game, especially because we're in Black History Month, and I know when you think about Black History Month, people may think about equal opportunity and jobs for everybody, and everybody knows that's important. But it's amazing how the black commerce has driven such industries, not just NBA basketball, NFL football. You can even say somewhat Major League Baseball because a lot of the records are held by African Americans, Big C. But if you look at the political climate, I'm just being honest from what I hear. I hope no one's offended. But it's as if every Caucasian candidate that's running for office, they're acting like they've always been a friend of the black community. They don't live in the black community. You rarely see them around African Americans unless they're trying to get the vote. Now, we see that oftentimes when college coaches come looking for kids to go play for their schools. So why is it now that since we've had the Civil Rights Bill, that so many politicians act like black Americans are their best friend? That make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, everybody stumps for a vote in every way you can. You got to realize up until 1964, African Americans weren't allowed to vote legally in America. So when you're going out and you're trying to gather a voting base, Charlton, African Americans were the first major minorities in America that politicians stumped after. And so everyone has always said what they're going to do for the African American community, but African American community is never recognized in politics until it's voting time.
Yeah, and so anyway, it's nice to know that you're wanted, Big C, especially for Valentine's Day. I'm sure some of these politicians are going to send roses. If you really love somebody, send them a rose. Don't ask them for the vote. Could you imagine you want to go out with somebody on Valentine's Day, instead of showing up with roses, you ask for her to vote? How does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you're looking for her vote. That's the reason why you show up with roses. You're looking for her vote of confidence in you.
So now I learned. See, you learned a lot on the Big C Sports Show. Maybe that's where I've been going wrong in life, Big C, but we can fix that. When we talk about Forbes and we talk about the NBA, the NFL, and the black dollar, and how important it is that people say, I've always admired the African American community. In fact, I'm going to create more jobs for the African American community. I'm going to make sure that we have civil rights. They say they're going to do everything but give reparations. You want to give some friends in the black community, give out some reparations, because we know we build up other countries, we can build up our own. I want to take a look at Big C's NBA Forbes money list and why big money does not always equal championships. And when you think about, in order to get on Forbes magazine, you got to be big. You got to be real. The most valuable franchise, your friend, the Dolan family, Big C, the New York Knicks, they're $4.6 billion, the NBA's highest value team. Why do they not win, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, why do they win? You mentioned the guy's name right off the bat, James Dolan.
Yeah.
You know, no one really wants to play for him. No one wants to work for him.
Yeah.
You know, the NBA is about community, Charlton, amongst the players and good feelings. And when you have an owner that's been anti that as far as dealing with superstars and former superstars in the league, people don't want to be around that environment. And when the players own 53% of the league, they have a say-so in where they go.
Yeah.
And New York used to be the marquee market in the NBA because it was the Big Apple and everybody wanted to be there from a media perspective.
Yeah.
Now with 24-hour sports cycles, Charlton, and you can see any game from anywhere in the U.S., it doesn't make any difference what media market you're in. It's about the popularity of a team.
Yeah, and you can watch it on your phone, too. Think about this, because money matters. And we were talking about real estate yesterday and how money matters in everything that we do, from the cost of a loaf of bread to the cost of a house. Forbes magazine is listing the average value of an NBA franchise. It's over $2 billion. That's average, Big C. We talked about the Knicks being $4.6 billion. And for the first time, that figure has grown nearly 600% in the last decade. It's not because more people are going to games. They found this thing, the reason we're doing the Big C Real Estate Show is called TV. And when you have TV sponsors and advertisers want to pay for that, and that puts money into the bankroll of those programs too. So with the average NBA franchise now valued at just over $2.1 billion, Forbes magazine said the New York Knicks are worth $4.6 billion. You know, by that calculations, that ranks top on the list. The Los Angeles Lakers, I think, maybe the second most recognized team, and I would say not behind the Knicks, but maybe behind the Boston Celtics. I might be wrong, but I know Boston has one more championship than the Lakers. But I think worldwide, people recognize Boston and LA maybe even more than the Knicks. They're listed at worth $4.4 billion, and that's by Forbes magazine. Golden State Warriors, 4.3. But I hear Ballmer, who owns the Clippers, is worth like $40 billion. So he's not on this list. Why not, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, if you look at the two top-ranking teams in the NBA, if you look at Milwaukee and you look at Toronto, Charlton, those are two of the least valued franchises economically in the league.
Yeah.
Money doesn't make a difference what a franchise is worth. It's about the players that you have within the franchise and the continuity that they have. So the value of an owner is secondary to the talent that's on the court. Everybody that owns NBA franchises is multi-billionaires.
Yeah.
So money is just a thing to them. It's about the talent that you can attract to a particular city and players who want to play together.
Yeah, I would love to be a billionaire. There was a song by Bruno Mars. He's saying, I want to be a billionaire so freaking bad. I want to sing that song too. Just to finish out some of the other good old boys, Big C, the rest of the top 10 and Big C's top 10 wealthiest NBA franchises, Chicago Bulls, $3.2 billion. Boston Celtics worth $3.1 billion. The Los Angeles Clippers, you know Barbara's hiding some of that money. He's not commingling his personal funds with the Clippers. They're worth $2.6 billion, and they both share the Staples Center. The Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant, don't come back at all until next year, $2.5 billion. Houston Rockets, no big man on the floor for the Rockets, but they're still lifting off, worth $2.4 billion. And the Dallas Mavericks, $2.4 billion. And the defending NBA world champion Toronto Raptors, worth $2.1 billion. Forbes also calculated the revenue for the 30 NBA teams, Big C, at a combined $8.8 billion last season. A new record is forecast that it will exceed $9 billion this year. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, but in that, the ratings are down with the NBA 22% this year because the Golden State Warriors are irrelevant because they were must-see television.
Yeah.
Even though revenue has grown, the popularity and visibility of the league is down this year.
Yeah, and let me get your quick thoughts then. How, with money going through the roof, it doesn't mean the fans are making more money, but money's going through the roof. I think the reason that ratings are down is because you mentioned it just the other day. I know almost every person over 18 has a cell phone. I see a lot of young kids, they are streaming games on their phones. A lot of older people with Nielsen boxes don't do that. A lot of people are cutting their cable. There are no Nielsen boxes on your phone when you're streaming a game. So I don't know how the value is going up, but the ratings are going down. I think people are just turning off the cable boxes that have the Nielsen ratings, and they're watching on their phones. To me, that makes a lot of sense for millennials. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I look at it from the perspective, what is there to see on NBA TV? Who is much see on NBA television? What team will gravitate you to the television or even a cellular device to watch a game on any given night of the week that is more exciting than what the Golden State Warriors have been over the last 5 years? To me, that's the reason why the ratings are down.
Yeah, that's a very good point, too. Even though my friends on the East Coast, it was basketball-centric, so they say, I'm sure it's just about market size and what market likes teams the most. And ironically, Golden State Warriors, even though their tickets are bought by a lot of the Silicon Valley money, you'll see empty seats like I've never seen in the last 10 years, even at the Oracle Arena.
It was the point we were just making. Yeah. The Golden State Warriors are irrelevant. You said there are empty seats
a lot of them.
In that new center that they have in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You never saw an empty seat in Oakland over the last 6 seasons.
Yeah, you never did, and sometimes that happens. I mean, prices go up, but I still think people want to put their money where people are winning. That's also part of it too. I want to focus on another story because it's big, and it's like we piggyback off it yesterday. When I watch the politicians, I'm so turned on by the political debates, Big C. I think for Valentine's Day, I have a date with CNN News, Big C, because I'm still so intrigued by all these people that are lily white saying they want the black vote, and without the black vote, they cannot become the president of the United States. I think that's so funny because to me, it's one of the rare times where you see people talk, and you know, especially, I won't mention names because I'm not trying to slant anybody, but there's just some people that have no history of interacting with African Americans, and all of a sudden, they're telling African Americans they're going to make their lives better. And there's one more thing I want to bring up before I get into college football's most valuable money teams. I heard this commercial, and it was about this politician out of New York City. I'm not going to say his name because he has many, many billions. You don't see him on stage, but he hides behind his commercials. They had an African American woman doing an advertisement for him, and they made her seem like she was so beaten down and really needed this white man to become the president so he could save her and make the economy better and make sure that everyone has health care. And it seemed like she was tired. I hate that that's the view they have of black Americans, either Willie Horton or someone who's downtrodden waiting for the white savior. I don't like that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, one of the things I'm not spending time doing, Charlton, is watching the politicians or looking at the advertisements that they put on. the proof is in the pudding. I mean, everybody sells a good story.
Yeah.
Who's going to have the actual facts in the end?
Yeah, who's going to have? Well, I got to get over that, Bixie. I tend to watch too much politics. It's part of how things are here in beautiful, sunny California. College football, most valuable money teams. Maybe they don't have the money that the New York Knicks have, or maybe they do when it looks at Forbes. And they finished dealing with the 2018 season. They're still calculating 2019 season. I was talking to a good old boy today from Texas. He owns 1,100 cattle, Big C, and he raises cattle and he sends them out to the market. He's 78 years old. He's a retired Marine. Actually, no, I'm sorry. He was retired Navy. I said, how did you get to over 1,100 cattle? Well, down in Texas, his grandfather and his father have been in the cattle business, and it just passed on for over the last 100 years. Even when black men couldn't get a loan to get a farm, Big C, they've been giving that to white men. It's funny how you hear people say they worked hard for what they got. No, he got that from his family for over 100 years. But college football, most valuable teams, would you believe? Texas A&M University, speaking of Aggie Land, they jumped to number one in the net worth of college football programs. I would have thought it would have been maybe some school like Ohio State or Michigan, but Texas A&M, it's amazing how they don't win a lot, but they're the wealthiest program in college football. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they win enough to get to that point, Charlton. When you think about things are bigger in the state of Texas, and Texas A&M is also part of the SEC. So when you think about the value of that program as well as the value of that conference, it's synonymous with each other.
Yeah, and speaking of that, they actually left what's called the Big 12 now. Formerly, it used to be called the Big 8 Conference. For years, it was a burnt orange. Texas Longhorns, they had been held as college football's ultimate cash cow, no pun intended. In 2011, Texas University was the first college football team to ever record $100 million in revenue in 2014. That team generated a profit of $92 million. All but two teams made that. It's amazing that the two top earners have been the state of Texas, Texas A&M, and Texas, but you can't find a national championship since 2005 when Texas won it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, everything is not always based on national championships. You got to look at the boosters and the donors and the revenue that you can create. They got the Longhorn Network, where they have their own network at the university, Charlton. So they have grown exponentially. They were always the number one school in the state as far as athletics for decades.
Yeah.
And now Texas A&M has catapulted them in finances, but Texas will always be synonymous with that state.
Yeah, and Texas is always synonymous with college football, too, when you think about programs where people say, what is college football? You think on the West Coast, USC. Maybe down south, you think Alabama. On the East Coast, maybe people still look at a school, like Virginia. That's old money where Virginia is located. And up north, you think Ohio State and Michigan. But that money is always keeping people afloat. Across the 3 years prior to last season, Texas A&M, you wonder how Jimbo got that $75 million contract, $75 million over, I think it was over 10 years, Big C. Texas A&M, the average annual revenues, $148 million, the most of any program in the nation. Not only tops the Longhorns by a large margin, but over that same period of time, Texas football averaged $133 million in revenue, making them a distant second. But they still are adding on to both stadiums. They've added on to Kyle Station. And now Texas, I believe they're adding about another 10 to 15,000 seats at the end of one of their end zones. Big C, we'll see where the money comes from. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, see, that's the growth of football east of the Rockies, Charlton.
Yeah.
When we talk about the downsizing of stadiums out on the West Coast and losing of programs, you see the influence of money and growth in programs east of the Rockies that you have in the state of Texas. You talked about Kyle Field, now the largest stadium in the SEC. The University of Texas adding 17,000 seats to their stadium coming up, and that's going to push it up to 120,000 seats for the regular season. So when you think about these mega structures, as far as college sports and where they're played and why kids want to go play at these institutions that have these huge on-campus facilities, Charlton, it speaks for itself.
It does speak for itself. And like my friend that has 1,100 cattle, he's a good old boy, but he was very cordial. But I was asking him, how did you amass 1,100 cattle? He said, I worked my tail off. I said, well, you came out of the Navy, so how did you get from out of the Navy to own 1,100 cattle? He said, oh, it's passed down from my granddad and my dad. It's been part of the family business. I just thought that was interesting how the wealth, and then you have the politicians looking for the black vote. They need to go down in Texas and get the guys that own 1,100 cattle. A few more things on Texas, because I had a roommate from Texas, and all he did was talk about football, even though he was very smart in college. Texas A&M, from 2014 through 2017 season, the A&M athletic department, it earned over $260 million in contributions, Big C. That means good old boys that own 1,100 cattle giving them money, nearly double what any other school made at that time. And that to me is amazing. No matter what part of the country you're in, when good old boys have that kind of money, it's going to help them have a better program, you would think, but it hasn't always amounted to that. I want to just cover just a couple of more things, because on the West Coast, I think it's important. You think about Texas athletics, nearly $10 million per year on average from Nike Corporation, making it the third biggest apparel deal in college sports. UCLA and Louisville, they rank first and second. Texas also received increasingly juicy rights payments from ESPN and then the Longhorn Network. So there's a lot of things we're going to talk about. It's all about who's playing into that program. They didn't get $260 million from people buying tickets. It came from good old boy contributions, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, those contributions have to have dividends also, Charlton. When people make investments in things, they look at return on investment, how good the product is. And when you talk about those West Coast programs versus the Southeast programs, Charlton, and the dividends that you receive in return, who's on television the most?
Yeah.
Where are you getting the most exposure for your dollar? Which program is benefiting you the most? Are those the programs that are having the double-digit wins and in the bowl games every year and fighting for conference championships? Are those teams that are struggling and constantly say we're in a real rebuilding process?
Well, think about that. I'm going to just run down a list. College football's most valuable teams. Number one, as we mentioned, is Texas A&M Aggies, part of the SEC. Number two, Texas Longhorns, part of the Big 12. A&M, $148 million. Texas, $133 million. And then you go up north to number three is Michigan, Big C, out of the Big 10. $127 million in revenue, Big C. Number four, Alabama, Crimson Tide. They have the most championships, but they're only number four on the list out of the SEC. $127 million in most valuable growth, Big C. Before that, you think about that. Ohio State, which you would assume has the biggest budget, they're ranked fifth in the country when it comes to being the most valuable teams. Money-wise, out of the Big Ten, $120 million in growth. And I'm sure their athletic director is not willing to give any of those kids any of that money. Just a few more teams, because I want to find a Pac-12 team in here also. I think that's important. You have the Oklahoma Sooners out of the Big 12, $118 million. Notre Dame Fighting Irish as an independent, $112 million. Auburn Tigers, number 8, out of the SEC, $112 million. LSU Tigers out of the SEC, $112 million. The Florida Gators come in at number 10 out of the SEC, $111 million. Then we have the Tennessee Volunteers, SEC, $108 million. The first school in the Pac-12 that has all the Nike flavor, 19,000 different uniforms. The University of Oregon Ducks out of the Pac-12, $92 million as their value, and a lot of that comes from Nike. Their stadium holds about 60,000. It's the outside influence that's helping them, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, what you just stated was a common theme, Charlton, as we said east of the Rockies. When you talked about the Big 12 and you're talking about the SEC and the Big 10, Charlton, the most valuable conferences in college football, and this is the reason why they get all the top recruits year in and year out. And when you think about the Big 10, Charlton, the Big 10 is the wealthiest conference in all of college football.
Yeah.
They create more revenue than any other conference. The SEC comes in second, and the Big 12 comes in third. So when you named off those three conferences, those are the three wealthiest. Michigan has always had the largest stadium in college football, so there's a reason why they rank up there economically where they do.
Yeah.
And you look at the large stadiums in the Big 10 as well as the SEC and the Big 12 with the expansion that they have in their stadiums, Charlton. That's the reason why those conferences are 1, 2, 3 in recruiting and revenue.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. I want to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. And we're going to come back and talk about something that the Pac-10 can be proud of. We'll take the Big C timeout, also called the Big C pause. We'll be back in just a... All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts, and the app that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports Podcast on Xfinity Comcast Cable. You can also follow Big C Sports Podcast on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. You just got to have a smart TV. And we talked about Forbes. We talked about my politician friends calling me, asking me for a donation to a millionaire to give a millionaire some money so he can become the president. And then you have some Caucasian politicians saying that they're the best friend to the African-American community as long as you can give them the vote, Big C, but they don't show up with flowers. But I think we could all learn something from Valentine's Day. I mistakenly called it the President's Cup yesterday, but it's called the Capital One Cup for college football. And really what it is it's an overall multi-sport award given to a school, acknowledged athletic success over all sports. So even a lot of media says the Pac-12's fallen off. Nobody wants to go to the Pac-12. That's just not true compared to the Capital One Cup. The schools are the conference with the most wins over the last 10 years. I'm just going to run down those names. 2010 and 11 season. For men's, it was Florida Gators. For women's, it was Stanford Cardinals. 2011 and 12, Florida Gators. For women, it was Stanford Cardinals. 2012 season and 13, UCLA Bruins for the men, North Carolina Tar Heels for the women. 2013 and 14, Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the men, Florida Gators for the women. 2014, Virginia Cavaliers for the men, Stanford Cardinals for the women. 2015 and 16 season, Stanford Cardinals for the men, University of Southern California Trojans for the women. 2016-17, Ohio State Buckeyes for the men, Stanford Cardinals for the women. 2017-18, Stanford Cardinals for the men and Stanford Cardinals for the women. 2018-19, Virginia Cavaliers for the men and Stanford Cardinals for the women. Almost half of the overall championships have been won by the Pac-12 Conference. And I think that shows that a lot of people are not trying to leave the Pac-12. It may be football perception, but you can't prove that with the numbers, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you're talking dominance in women's sports when you're talking about the Pac-12, and there's really one school that's doing that, and that's the Stanford Cardinals. When you look at the participation from that university, it's very minimal in the rest of the sports. So their women have dominated. We just recognized their women's volleyball championship third in the last 4 years, so that's one of the reasons why they dominate. They have great golf teams as well as tennis and swimming teams out there on the farm in Stanford. But when we look at the overall perspective, are these huge revenue-generating sports? I think that's what college sports is driven by. I mean, it's nice to win the Capital One Cup.
Yeah.
But what's generating revenue for your university? You just talked about that, what Forbes value when it comes to football, what these programs are generating. And those revenue sports are what drive the rest of the athletic department.
Yeah, it does drive that department. So that's very true. But I also want for the parents out there, and especially for men of color, because we spend a lot of time advocating for Black American athletes and how they get exploited by white men, for the most part. Come play for my school. We're going to make you professional athletes. There's also, and people can Google this, and I want them to, when they do rankings for every FBS conference, the average academic ranking of each school, that's where you don't see the SEC dominating. Ironically, you look at schools like the Big Ten, and primarily because of Northwestern University, Big C, they're the reason that they have such a high ranking. And, you know, they're a very hard school to get into. They have Michigan at number 41 for graduating their players. Wisconsin at 68 in the country. Maryland 69. Nebraska is way down at 270. So that's a matter of fact, Big C. Has nothing to do with athletics. It's about, are they getting an education? ACC came in at number 2. And that's primarily based on Duke, ranked number 22 in the country. And then Virginia, ranked number 36 in the country, as well as Boston College. The Pac-12 comes in third. When you think about kids that are graduating from their conferences, Big C, the SEC does not compete. Stanford's the highest ranked in all of the FBS programs, number 3 overall in the country. The institution in the FBS is amazing that Stanford's that high, as well as recruiting, sending kids on to the NFL, as well as graduating kids. I also want to just toot the horn for the Pac-12, even though they're not paying me to do it. If you look at some of the other schools in the top 100, that are actually graduating their kids at a high rate. Cal Berkeley's number 35. UCLA's number 45. USC number 71. And Washington 75. And that's in the top 100. In fact, in the top 75, you have several Pac-12 schools. If you were to look at the SEC, their top school is Vanderbilt. They would be the 4th highest graduating program on the West Coast. Big C, your thoughts?
So why would you say that Stanford ranks so high, Charlton?
Because it's in the list of the average ranking. They're number 3 in the whole country.
But
overall.
What do you think that makes Stanford rank so high?
Oh, their academics. The kids they recruit, just like Vanderbilt. But even Stanford, if Cal Berkeley got a higher ranking than Vanderbilt.
But let me tell you why Stanford ranks so high on the list.
Yeah.
To take a scholarship at Stanford, you have to be pre-qualified academically. You just can't go accept a scholarship like you can at any other university.
Yeah.
You have to qualify at Stanford academically, and that is the reason why they rank so high, just like in Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
You have to qualify academically before you can take a scholarship. So as we look at that scale, Stanford and Vanderbilt are going to be a little skewed a little bit differently, as well as Northwestern.
Yeah.
Because those are academic institutions first prior to being athletic universities.
Yeah.
And then you also look at their performance on the football field in these past couple of seasons. Do they have winning records?
Yeah, and I think even Vanderbilt, very successful in their baseball program. They've done a great job.
I'm talking football. Do they have winning records on their football teams? Were either one of those schools in a bowl game last year?
Not necessarily, but I will tell you this, because I want to make sure that we're not like the white politicians that want to show up and get our kids to come play football. This is so important, especially for people of color. It's egregious if we don't mention it, because a lot of mainstream, they'll never tell you this stuff. As I mentioned, Cal Berkeley and UCLA, 35th and 45th in the country, USC 71st, University of Washington 75, and the top programs that graduate kids. I want to go down to the SEC, because these are the schools that have the 100,000-seat stadiums, and I've been saying that they learn to better exploit young black talent. It's a fact. When you look at the schools that make it the bottom of graduating their kids, think about this. Mississippi State, 353 in the country. Ole Miss, 332 in the country. Kentucky, 319 in the country. The school that won the national championship last year, LSU football. Think about this. LSU is 191 in the country in graduating kids. That's criminal, Big C. Texas A&M, the top producing program for money, 150th in the country at graduating kids. That's egregious. And if people read and they knew that, they would not send their kids to be exploited, especially young black parents.
Do you know where the state of Mississippi ranks nationally on education?
Probably pretty bad if the university...
No, but I'm just asking, do you know where the state of Mississippi ranks nationally on education?
Based on this stat, not very high, but maybe you have that information. I don't have that.
The state of Mississippi ranks 49th in the United States on education and funding towards education, all education in the United States. You think about that, 49th in the nation.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why the numbers are so low. So you have to know the overall numbers, why something ranks the way it is. The state of Mississippi has never put much emphasis on overall education, whether it's in secondary school, whether it's in grammar school, or whether it's in college, Charlton. The state of Mississippi does not boast on education.
Yeah, well, I know that this...
And that's a national thing. That's not just from athletics. That is a national thing. So when you have a state that ranks 49th overall in the United States on education, you can't expect much from any educational institution from kindergarten through college.
And that's why I wonder why a lot of kids are heading to the SEC. It must be something more that they're just being told you're going to go pro. I want to finish this story because I think it's so important. I hate the exploitation of black boys and girls, but if we don't say anything, then we tacitly consent to it. If you look at only 2 schools in the SEC that crack the top 100 as ESPN is pouring money into them and other TV networks want to go down there and exploit more black boys, the only schools that made the top 100 is Vanderbilt at 47 and Florida at 83. Everybody else is like cattle, like my friend from Texas. They don't care about those cows. They just make sure that they can send them to the market and make money. And it's a shame that young black boys are being treated the same by these schools, Big C. And to me, I know that has to hurt at some level after football.
Do you ever put any emphasis on their parents as far as being mentorship for where their kid goes to school at? What is the parent looking at? Is the parents looking at the academics of the institution, or
Obviously
is it left up to to the layman public or even people talking sports such as ourselves to look at the institution. I think this falls on a parent. If a parent has not done the research where they send their child to school at, or it may be the only institution that kid can get into with his academic record. We don't know what the numbers are as far as that kid trying to get in to a college. Did that college have to fudge the transcripts to get that kid in because they weren't academically eligible? And so they're allowing them an opportunity to better their lives because they couldn't cut the mustard in college, in high school academically. So the college did everything they could to make them academically eligible to play football, and it's up to the kid to pick up his academic standards.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. But exploitation means when you have the power and the kid doesn't, and those schools should be ashamed of themselves for being so low in the whole country, but the most revenue-producing football states.
But to give a kid an opportunity to gain an education, it's that old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with any kid, whether he's in Stanford, who's been pre-qualified, or he's going to USC, where he's not pre-qualified. It's up to that kid whether he wants to graduate. You have 4 to 5 years to graduate when you go into college. It's do you want to party and just play sports, or do you want to put your nose to the grindstone and get on the dean's list? Everyone has an equal opportunity when they attend a university.
And I agree with that, but as you know, if you have 16 universities and they brag about how big their stadiums are and only 2 crack the top 100 for graduation, that's a pathetic big C. But everybody has to do what makes them happy, and if thinking you're going to go pro is enough to get you to go down there, then, that's part of the parents and that kid's fault too. They got to know what they're getting into. I want to contrast
Tell me what kid takes a scholarship who does not have the aspirations of being a professional athlete. That's number one when they're recruited. Everyone has said, hey, I want to play in the league, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, hockey. And you take a scholarship with that in mind, that you want to become a professional athlete. Not a school teacher, which a lot of them become. Not a trash picker, a lot of them become. Not a civil worker, which a lot of them become. They all have aspirations. Every college athlete that's on a scholarship is to become a professional athlete. Otherwise, they would not participate in the game. You can't tell me, and you said it yourself, Stanford has a high rate of professional football players that come out of that program. They're academically qualified to get into that university. They don't go on the football team saying, because I'm academically qualified, I don't want to play football. I'm here. If I can't be a success in the NFL, I'll be a success in another field. So they all, regardless of the institution that they go to, have the aspirations of being a professional in that sport.
And everybody does. I just hate when the universities exploit those boys. You can't go to class and travel on airplanes and lift weights all day if you want to make the team. But we know that's part of it. I want to touch on something else that the Pac-12 came under some scrutiny for. I think Larry Scott should probably be replaced as the commissioner of the Pac-12 conference. He's not advocating for bowl games, but maybe he should be applauded for their kids having a higher graduation rate. So maybe I'm on the wrong side of the fence. College football, in the last 3 months, I think 1/4 of the head coaches have left their position from Pac-12 football coaching programs simply because they were offered more money to go to some of these conferences where they don't graduate kids. And I think that's egregious, but who's going to tell a man not to double your income, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's the attraction of going somewhere else, and this is what we talk about, the exodus from the West Coast. Is that the Pac-12 is not that attractive. I mean, if they're at dinner, the Pac-12 right now is like the leftover meat on the table when it comes to football. We talked about last night in real estate and conferences. If you look at the top 2 teams in the Pac-12, and you look at the top 2 teams in the SEC, the population in the cities of the top 2 teams in the Pac-12 in Eugene, Oregon, and Salt Lake City, Utah, is larger than what it is in Athens, Georgia, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So it's not about the size of the city. It's about what the city brings to the university and the fan base. And so when I look at Mel Tucker's exodus today from the University of Colorado in
More
Boulder,
money. He doubled his money.
Boulder, Colorado has a population of over 250,000 people. He went to East Lansing, Michigan, who has a population of 49,000 people. But he left a stadium that was the size of 51,000 to go to a stadium that seats 76,000. And so when you look at what a community wants to put into a football program, always have a packed house at Michigan State where you have sparse attendance from time to time in Boulder, Colorado, and you can double your income by going to East Lansing. You think about the Big Ten Network's television package.
Yeah.
It is the largest college television package in all of college football, what the Big Ten possesses. It's even larger than the SEC. So we talked about the payout and what each SEC school received at the end of the football season.
Yep.
The Big Ten's payout was even larger. So they're allowed to pay coaches more to attract them to come to those conferences. And you can't be sitting there saying that a coach should not go there. Mike Leach left Washington State.
For more money.
38,000 people live in up there where he went to school at, up there in Pullman, Washington.
Yeah.
38,000 people live in that city to go to Fayetteville, Arkansas. A population of about 179,000 and a stadium that seats 76,000 and doubling his income.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anybody in any job position, when you're offered twice the income of where you are to move on to the next place, and not only just you as a coach, but you can bring your entire coaching staff and we'll double their salaries also. That's what's called progression in life. This is what the politicians are talking about, that I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah.
That's what these universities and the Big Ten and the SEC are telling coaches. Come on with us. We're going to take care of you and your family and your friends.
Yeah, they'll take care of them, but they won't graduate the kids, and I still think that's egregious. Herm Edwards actually got a 2-year extension at Arizona State. They don't have the same academics or some of the same finances that Ohio State has, but he still did a good job with his kids down there at Arizona State. I want to ask you this thing that as we look at, money, we know baseball is going through the roof. Baseball, they have a lot of empty seats in baseball stadiums. I mean, no matter what the market is, New York does great. San Francisco, at times when they're winning. Oakland has a hard time getting people in the seats. The Dodgers do a great job. Atlanta, they got a new stadium. They're not always sold out. The team down in Florida, down in Miami, they don't even know they have baseball going on down there sometimes. There's not a lot of people there in such a beautiful city. But I want to get your thoughts. One thing I like, and maybe I don't like, baseball proposed rule changes for 2020 in order to challenge a play. It used to be 30 seconds. They're going to move it down to 20 seconds to try to speed up the game. And to me, I'm okay with that. At the same time, I want to get your thoughts. Do you agree with the rule changes for a pitcher? They're taking strategy out of baseball. You have to face a minimum of 3 pitchers now. You can't bring in that one closer that's used to a batter without him facing 2 more batters. That takes away the strategy of baseball. Yes, it may speed up the game, but I don't like that. Do you like that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, baseball is all about making the game more interesting, Charlton, and I agree with it for the mere fact that it allows more potential scoring in a game, and that's what you're looking for in baseball. You talked about the numbers being down. Attendance has been down in baseball for the last 7 years. It's gone down the last 7 years.
Yeah.
And so the reason why attendance has gone down is because the games have taken so long and the scoring has not been there. When in the old days when a pitcher would go 8 and 9 innings, Charlton, to complete a game, now you can walk out there. I saw a game where 14 pitchers pitched last season.
Wow.
14, an egregious number. You're pitching more pitches than you are innings being played, and this was in a 9-inning game.
Yeah.
And so the delay on every time you bring another pitcher into the game to face a batter, you're talking about anywhere from a 3 to 5 minutes added on to the game in the delay for this pitcher to come in from the bullpen, take some warm-up pitches before he starts throwing to the batter.
Yeah.
So I like this new rule. Hopefully we'll get more runs scored in the game, and now we'll see if this baseball pitcher is worth his snuff. You have him on the roster because he's a major league pitcher, and he can get batters out.
Yeah.
And so this comes from strategy from the manager. Who do you bring in, a lefty or righty that can get you 3 outs?
Yeah, well, revenue's going up, but they're saying the games are too long. I think they got to have a fine and even way to balance that out. Revenue's always great, whether people are sitting too long in their seats or not, but I'm sure they'll figure that out. But today we know Major League Baseball, all pitchers and catchers, they've now reported to spring training. Is spring training too long, or is that too long also? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, you need the spring training, Charlton. You need some batting practice. You need some pitching practice before you get into opening day of the season. This has been traditional for baseball ever since baseball's inception, to get your 14 to 16 games of spring training ball in, Charlton, to get the kinks out, to understand what your lineups are going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's always a balancing act they'll figure it out. NFL, free agency, is that overrated? I mean, everybody wants to know, is a player going to sign? Is he going to be franchised or not? the owner, when he wants to write the check, when he's finished fishing on his boat, Big C, down in Texas, he'll write the check, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, NFL free agency has always been overrated. I mean, when you look back over the years, what free agent has come in and made a difference in a franchise that has led a franchise to a Super Bowl victory? It just has not happened, Charlton. You get free agency moving. It takes a free agent a couple years to get orientated into the new lineup that he's in. You're not going to come in and make an instant impact. So you're going to go out and sign a cornerback, and he's going to change the face of your franchise. Free agent quarterbacks just don't pop up. Running backs, nobody wants to give them money. And a receiver, you're not going to be a dynamic game changer regardless of who you are.
Yeah, those days we've seen Julio Jones are probably the best out there. There's a lot of other people who would say, no, I'm better. But it's all in, do you want to write the check or not? I do want to ask you a question. We talked about Texas a lot, and my friend that I just met with 1,100, cows down in Texas, Big C, we're talking a little bit of football too. Why has there been so much, enmity against Dak Prescott by media saying he is or he's not a franchise player? I think he's the third most winningest coach, or actually quarterback, since he's been in the league, Big C. Why has there been so much anger against him, but there has not been a cry from the NFL media in mainstream about the New York Jets to move away from Sam Darnold? He's been just like his predecessor from USC, Matt Leinart, Mark Sanchez, Matt Barkley. They were all highly praised college athletes. They have not helped their teams win in the NFL, even though Mark Sanchez did get the Jets to 2 playoff games. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that was mainly based on defense with the Jets. When you look at the drawback against Dak Prescott in Dallas, Charlton, we've come up on a new era in the NFL, and these guys have always been quarterbacks their entire life. They're just labeled as black quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Never in the history of the NFL have black quarterbacks been at the crescendo where they can demand the most money out of the league.
Yeah.
You saw what Russell Wilson did last year when he put a demand on the Seattle Seahawks. He's never had a losing record since he's been in the NFL, Charlton, and he's made the playoffs 7 of the 8 years he's been the quarterback with the Seattle Seahawks. You look at Dak Prescott. He's had 2 successive AFC championships with the NFC, with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And he's given his team a home team discount ever since he's been there. He's been the most underpaid, overrated quarterback since he's been in the NFL. When you look at his winning numbers. But the NFL has never faced this before, nor has national media ever faced this before, saying that black quarterbacks are the face of the NFL. Last year when the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams gave Jared Goff and Carson Wentz money, the NFL praised them, even though Carson Wentz has never won a playoff game. He was praised by the media and the Philadelphia Eagles for giving him this money, making him the highest paid quarterback in the league. It lasted about a cup of coffee, and Jared Goff leapfrogged him. And the media was comfortable with that. You gave these 2 white young quarterbacks all of this money, and neither one of them had a better winning percentage than Dak Prescott.
No.
The problem with Dak Prescott is that he's a black quarterback. It's the same as with Patrick Mahomes. The talk has surfaced that Patrick Mahomes shouldn't take so much money. He should leave money on the table so the team can pay other players. What other players have to ask themselves, do I want to go play football with Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, and he'll give me a chance to win a Super Bowl ring, and I can go get my money in free agency elsewhere, but I want the Super Bowl ring. And this is the same thing you're looking at with Dak Prescott. No one is saying in the media that any of these white quarterbacks should take less. They haven't said that about your cousin in Minnesota who stole $84 million from the Vikings guarantee. Jimmy Garoppolo's gotten $137 million out in San Francisco. Nobody is saying really that the 49ers need to move on beyond him. No one has said anybody should move on between Matt Ryan in Atlanta. Look at Matthew Stafford, who's never won anything in Detroit in the decade he's been there. No one is saying that the white quarterback's overpaid. The white media has a huge problem saying that black quarterbacks are the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and they're going to be the 5 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL over the next 2 years. They'll all break the bank, and the white media has a hard time swallowing that because they've been what the NFL has been over the years, the advocates for the white quarterback.
It's like my good old friend down in Texas. I said he's a retired, Navy guy, and I said, how'd you get 1,100 cattle? He said, I worked hard every day. I said, yeah, but how did you get 1,100? He said, oh, I inherited the business from my granddad and my dad, Big C. It's been like that for a lot of people. They're just not used to seeing people of color have more than them. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Big C, NHL last night, St. Louis Blues defenseman Jay Baumeister collapsed on the floor, and the Blues bench really, I think they said he suffered a cardiac episode. General Manager Doug Armstrong told the reporters Wednesday that he was required to have a defibrillator, and I believe that's what saved his life. We need those everywhere, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this was a horrific scene last night in Anaheim where the defenseman collapsed when he was on the bench, actually suffered a heart attack. And thanks to the first responders, Charlton, we don't give these people enough praise around the country, not just what they do on the street to everyday citizens, Charlton, but those who also serve in our athletic venues.
Yeah.
And last night in Anaheim, at the pond down there, Charlton, his life was saved by the first responders there on the bench and the medical staff of the St. Louis Blues. I want to give some commemoration out to these people and great admiration and thought for their diligent work in saving the defenseman's life last night.
That's so important. I really wish everybody well, and I hope that he has a strong recovery. And I know that's a scary episode, but everyone, please, learn a little bit of CBR, how to help people. Tonight's quickly the NBA schedule. The Pistons are at the Magic, the Hawks at the Cavaliers, the Raptors at the New Jersey Nets. Will they go for 16 in a row? The Wizards at the Knicks, the Bucks at the Pacers, the Trailblazers will play at the Grizzlies. The Hornets are at the Timberwolves, the Kings are at the Mavericks, the Warriors are at the Phoenix Suns, the Miami Heat at the Utah Jazz, the LA Lakers at the Denver Nuggets in a Mile High State. Big C. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, and rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I want to look at this date in black history on February 12, 1909. This is the day that the NAACP was formed in New York by a coalition of white and black political advocates, Charlton, who sought equality for mankind in America.
And we will make sure that we carry on mankind too. And you can seek equality too every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.